Welcome, everyone. It's the first Wednesday of the month, and that means it's time for Coffee and Conversations with Leslie. You're probably wondering why Sarah and I are here. Well, her guest today is like no guest you have ever seen on our shows. And we really wanted to be here with all of you on this momentous occasion.
And this is a momentous occasion, and you have heard about this person. You have heard about this guest. You have heard Leslie talk about what a profound impact this person has made on Leslie live from the Woman Up stage. She's talked about this interaction on our Friday live shows, and she's talked about it with me countless times one-on-one and also with our team. We read the book that she'll be talking about. We've unpacked it, and I'm so thrilled she is bringing this person to our stage today.
So, without further teasing or ado, we are going to hand it over to Leslie. We're going to hop in the chat with all of you and meet her special guest. So, we'll see you soon. Bye.
Welcome to the May edition of Coffee and Conversation. And I can't tell you how excited I am about this morning. A very, very special guest and a very special topic that for those of you that have heard me speak at the Women Up conference every year, I almost always refer to the power of active listening, the superpower of being a good listener. And I often tell the story of the person that really led me into this aha moment about how critical it is to truly be present and listen to another human being. And that person is Dave Stark, and he is, that's our topic, and he's our guest. So I want to first of all say welcome, Dave, and thank you so much for being here. How does it feel to be the first non-staff, non-elected, the first guy really to be on the Women Up stage here?
No pressure.
No pressure.
Honestly, this was just revealed to me a second ago, and
I know
it's an honor, a bit intimidating, and hopefully I can live up to the outstanding content that Woman Up has provided from the beginning. So thank you for the opportunity and for the challenge.
Oh, it's so great. It's so great to have you here. I just want to do a slight introduction. I feel like many of the people on know you already, but for those of you that don't, Dave is the Public Affairs Director, also known as a GAD, a Governmental Affairs Director for the Bay East Association of Realtors, which is headquartered in Pleasanton. And my dear friend Tricia Thomas is the CEO there, and made a wonderful decision 15 plus years ago when she hired Dave. And so he is a ace in terms of public affairs, being involved in the local government. I had the opportunity many years to come up and speak to the local elected officials about housing and all of that. Just an incredible resume. But I want to specifically ask Dave about a couple of things that are really special about you, which one is music, and I see the cello behind you. One is motorcycle racing, and one is cats. So I would love it if you could just share a little bit more about the personal side.
Well, first, the irony of asking someone who's known as a listener to speak is not lost on me. So bear with me if I struggle with some of these questions that are centered on me. That's a bass. That's a double bass or an upright bass that I started playing probably about a year ago. I've been playing electric bass for many years. The electric basses they're pretty, but they're in the closet. But that's a double bass.
All right, I duly corrected. Thank you.
It's all good, and that thing is
it's
so
all
much
the perspective.
Yeah, it's so much fun to play. It's very, very visceral. You hug it. It's tactile. It's this big thing that you have this kind of physical relationship with, and it's just so much fun to play. Motorbike racing. I've loved motorcycles for many years. I've been racing for about 20 years, and the irony of motorbike racing is I'm comfortable standing up in front of unlimited number of people and speaking. No problem with that. You put me on the racetrack, and I love motorcycles. I like working on them. I like building them. I like talking about them. But when I'm on the track, that is not my natural environment. And it's been a very grounding, humbling experience the years I've been racing, because it helps put me in touch with folks that aren't comfortable doing other things. And I race with my wife, and up to just a couple of years ago, I raced with my dad as well. So the three of us were on the track at the same time. Was great.
Incredible.
And cats, love them. And it's been great during the lockdown to confirm that cats do sleep 20 out of 24 hours of the day. So, and if we have time later, I'll share some new cat behaviors that we've discovered. One of our cats really adapting to the fact that we're home all the time.
That's terrific. Sleeping is their superpower. So I'm going to start by just setting up the luncheon that we had, where I had this incredible aha moment. And I think it was one of the years, and it was maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago. I can't remember exactly when, but I had come up, I think it was your meeting when you bring in the local electeds, and I get to talk a little bit about housing, and the local realtors speak. It's a great event. And then Dave said, "Oh, let's go to lunch before you head back down south." So we're sitting down, looking at each other, having lunch. And I can't remember what question Dave asked me, but I started to answer, and it kind of went on and on. And all of a sudden, I was just gripped with this intense feeling of being heard. And it was odd. I was like, wow, I don't have this feeling often. And I said, "Dave, can we just stop the lunch for just 1 second? I need to do a sidebar. And I want to ask you about what the hell is going on here, because you're not interrupting me. You're not finishing my sentence. You're not embellishing. You are listening to me. Like, what gives?" And so what did you say?
Well,
you remember this, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I remember all of our meetings and lunches, because you get an opportunity to have a lunch or a conversation with Leslie Appleton. You're going to remember that. And I think the analogy I might have thrown out there was the scene from Pulp Fiction. I said I was listening, and there's that great scene from the film. And I don't know if you want me to relate it, or if you want to.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the 1995 film Pulp Fiction, Quentin Tarantino, there's a scene set at this fictional kind of throwback restaurant called Jackrabbit Slim's, where John Travolta's character, Vincent Vega, and Uma Thurman's character, Mia Wallace, they're on this kind of awkward date thing, and they're having a meal, and there's this kind of awkward silence thing, and Mia Wallace, the Mia Wallace character, asked Vincent, "Are you the kind of person that listens, or do you just wait to speak?" And Vincent Vega's character awkwardly says, "Well, I wait to speak, but I'm working on listening." And that, there's a lot of kind of compelling content in that film, but that really stuck with me.
Was that your aha moment?
I don't know if it was an aha moment in 1995 when I saw the film. As I progressed through my career and recognized just the value that others have, particularly others that have more experience and more knowledge, or just different experiences, that active listening and the effort being made to actively listen is a thing. It's a very valuable and tangible thing. And conveniently, Quentin Tarantino, created this pop culture reference for us to it's kind of a cute, easy way to bring that to light. The fact that it's a thing, and it's something that we should be aware of.
I think as I, Ubered or whatever, got back to the airport, I searched for that snippet of that scene, and I found it. And it just got me on this quest to learn more about, because initially I'm like, what do you mean listen or wait to talk? Because you're always kind of waiting to talk. It's a conversation. But what I have found is that active listening is an incredible gift that you give yourself, because it gives you permission to not be focused on what you're going to say next, but be focused on the person and what they're saying. And it's a little bit subtle, but it's really not. It's like day and night, and it has fundamentally changed the quality of conversation that I have with people. Although I will say it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because once you become aware of hijacking of your thoughts, of your conversation, or interruption, or all of the things that happen when people aren't active listening to you, it's, you're very aware of it, and there isn't always a lot of things you can do about it, right? You just kind of go with it, if you will. So I don't know. So one of the things I wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about is what this hijacking of conversation looks like. And I've done some thinking about, it's partly, I'm thinking that my experience is like your experience, and so you're telling me, someone in your family has cancer and it's really been tough for the family. And my response is, oh my goodness, my mother had cancer and this is what we went through. And that effectively hijacks the conversation from your experience to my experience, and really negates the uniqueness of your experience. And you shouldn't do that, right?
Well, what's unique about active listening and the when we had that meal and the light went on for you, and it's something that I've been working on for a number of years, is in the ensuing years, there are a few things that have happened that have really illustrated how critical it is for all of us, and not just within real estate professional context or whatever, to be active listeners. And the two things that have happened, the Me Too movement, and then the social unrest and the issues related to equity, inclusion, and diversity, that have come up more recently, really speak to how critical it is for us to listen and to understand. Because when you think about what particularly, Me Too was, people not listening, not paying attention, imposing their power, having this hegemonic relationship with others. And when confronted with certain behaviors, or the fact that these behaviors are rampant in our society, and then moving on to the social unrest that we're all experiencing, the defense mechanisms have come up in so many people, or the statements, the virtual signaling, or whatever it's called. So to hear anecdotes from individuals that have had different experiences, unfortunately, I think that there's this default that many of us go to where, I'm not a misogynist, I'm not a racist. Park that and bring those defense mechanisms down and be open. And it's really, really hard. It's really, really hard, because it's so easy to say, to say, well, I'm not part of that. I'm not part of the problem. I'm a righteous person, blah, 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 blah. To me, that's not what this is all about. Whether it's Me Too or the social equity and inclusion stuff, it's about understanding. It's about being empathetic. It's about active listening.
I was talking this weekend. We had some guests, which was really great after a year of not. And we talked about this in particular. And one of the questions that I was asked was, well, how do I do that? How do I become a better listener as I'm in conversation? And I said, it's so simple. Care about the other person, be interested in them. Instead of bringing in your experience, ask them a question. Try to find out more about who they are. And even if it's someone that you're, 180 on whatever particular issue you might be engaged in, by listening, you get context and understand where they're coming from. And that also enables them to feel heard. And you need to be heard and seen before you can actually change, right? You need people to see you for where you where you are. And I think that's such a big part. I'm so happy you brought these topics up about what we're going through today, because people aren't hearing each other.
Well, you said the C word, change.
Yeah.
And when you think about what motivates someone to have a conversation, what's in it for them? Are you looking for an opportunity to pontificate? Are you looking for, affirmation from someone else? So here's an analogy we'll try. If you're lost somewhere, you don't have your phone, you need directions.
Right.
And you ask someone for directions because you need to change. You need to change where you're going to get you to your destination. If you really think you know where you're going and you don't feel like you're lost or you don't feel like you need directions, you're not going to ask for directions. You're just going to keep on going.
Right.
So perhaps one of the ways, if someone is asking you, well, how do I start this, is understanding, well, why do you want to interact with anyone? And that could be, email, text, instant message, a Facebook post, whatever, Instagram. What are you trying to get out of this interaction? And like, for instance, when we had lunch, one of my big motivations was, hey, here's an opportunity to pick Leslie Upton Young's brain. I mean, I'm a hack economist. Here's a real economist. So one of the reasons I was in listen mode is that there was a whole bunch of really good insights that I was hoping to get from you. So that was a clear motivation. And perhaps that's where you start, is what do I want to get out of this conversation? And if you really just need to dump, which is fine, if you need to get things off your chest, perhaps you're just real transparent with your conversational partner and say, hey, thanks for this Zoom call, or thanks for swapping texts, or thanks for meeting with me, because I guess people can do that now. I just want to let you know I need to dump for a minute, and just be transparent about it. And then maybe once that's out of the way, then the true listening can kick in.
I think that's really a good point, is really clearly signaling to the other person kind of what you need and where you are, because a lot of times, they don't know, and the situation makes them feel uncomfortable. And I want to reference one of the examples that was given by Anna Sale in her essay in the New York Times a couple of days ago on how to make your small talk big was the topic. And she's describing a woman that she knew who lost her husband. They were hiking in Maine, and he was essentially washed away in a river. It was just one of these freak accidents, and how unhelpful the comments, I'm so sorry, you'll feel better soon, you'll meet somebody else, how it just was not helpful. And it really came from a place of, they're uncomfortable with my situation, so they want to make my situation go away so they feel comfortable. It's kind of about them. And what she said was the most comforting exchanges didn't have a motive to fix anything. And she told her about an encounter where she's at a local bookstore waiting in line for coffee. And a gentleman came to stand next to her and said that while he hadn't known her partner well, he'd always been impressed with him. And he added, I just want to tell you, this is going to take a lot longer than anybody will tell you before you start to feel normal in any way again. And that was so honest. And she felt connected, because that's how she was feeling. This is terrible, and it's going to take a long time. So I think that's a really good insight, and just there are many examples to look at, but putting yourself in that person's position, and what is it helpful for you to hear, and hearing about your relative with the similar experience, or that you're going to move on from this, isn't what they need to hear. It's not listening.
There's so many platforms now for us to share our opinions. It's so easy, and it's almost expected. Social media is rife with this just one-way communication. It's posting the pithy observations or reposting the memes or whatnot. And circling back again to our conversation and just how the world has changed in the ensuing years, perhaps this expectation that when you're communicating with someone, it has to be, expository. It's got to be opinion. Maybe we all just need to take a few steps back from that, especially in this virtual environment where so much of our communication are in these little packaged things where you're expected to post, you're on a Zoom call, you're expected to throw things in the chat, you're expected to throw things out. When we're in real life, perhaps we're just, we're so used to doing that
Yep.
Maybe it's time to back off from the opinion sharing and get back to the listening, which is going to be, Leslie, it's going to be really, really hard when we have the opportunities to have these real conversations, just because last few years, it's all been, one-way conversation. What can I post? What can I tweet? What can I share? What can I throw in a quick TikTok video? And there's going to have to be some relearning of some skills, or perhaps learning for the first time some skills about an effective conversation really needs to be bidirectional.
Right. And when we're face to face, because the whole Zoom platform as well creates a demand for efficiency. And it's kind of like, how are you doing? How was your weekend? Okay, let's go. And I love this quote from Anna Sale's essay again, where she says, our entire social lives have become a middle school dance. Unrealistic expectations in the lead up, self-conscious regrets in the aftermath. And I just think you made such a good point about learning these skills anew, or really for the first time as we come out of this. And, some conversations maybe you just don't need to have right now, right? I think your point earlier about what is the motivation for connecting in the first place. I think that's really important to kind of establish that before you go forward. The other book I talk about this book all the time, but for those of you that Celeste Headley's book, We Need to Talk, and she has a TED Talk, but I think that was one of the first, after our conversations, I was at a conference where Celeste spoke, and I couldn't wait to read the book and kind of get going in that direction. And one of the things I remember is she presents all these statistics, like our attention span is less than that of a goldfish, and that people speak at this rate, but they're able to listen much faster. And so that's why there's all this room in your head when someone else is speaking to kind of input thoughts and information. And one of the things I took away from that is the word intentional is so important here. You have to really focus, and really say, I am listening to this person. And as you go away from it, come back and truly be there. And it does get easier, but it's amazing how hard it is in the beginning.
With all respect, I don't know if it gets easier.
Yeah.
And here's why I'm sharing that with you, particularly if we're going to talk about just the moment right now. So much of our communication is this kind of stuff. It's virtual. And that has presented a whole new set of challenges in terms of what's distracting, because it's so easy to, okay, I'm going to throw this conversation up, or I'm going to throw this webinar up in one window, and then I'm going to have 15 other things going on. And we're constantly,
right,
our attention in this virtual environment. Let's face it, even when all the shelter in place stuff goes away and we do have the opportunity to be IRL, this is still going to be a reality for many of us. So staying engaged in this environment is going to be hard. Now, just because it doesn't get easier doesn't mean you can't get better at it.
Right.
And, the analogy that comes to mind is when I used to practice yoga on a regular basis, the hardest thing wasn't turning yourself into a pretzel. The hardest thing was keeping your mind in the room.
Right.
And I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine at our outside gym class last night about yoga. Do you study yoga? Do you practice it? And, to tie it back to this, it's a practice. It's something that you work on, and as you age, just as many athletic activities may get more challenging. It doesn't mean you stop doing them. It doesn't mean that just because it's harder to do them, you stop doing them. No, you keep doing it. And frankly, I don't know if we can ever master active listening, because some other kind of communication technology is probably going to come along at some point that makes just the foundation of how we're speaking with each other different. Or, going back to challenging topics, Me Too, diversity, maybe there's going to be another big social issue that comes up that's going to make it hard for us to talk to each other. So
Right.
I wasn't trying to push back on it. It's not possible to become a more active listener. It's just something that you can't rest on your laurels. So,
No, I agree 100%. I think what changed for me is I know what it feels like. When I get there, I know that I'm there. And I'll just rep one other book here. Anna Sale has a book that's just come out called Let's Talk About Hard Things. And one of the chapters is on identity. And I think that would be a great topic for people to engage in. But I want to ask you about something practical that I've been struggling with in this issue. And that is the whole issue of interrupting, where someone asks you a question or the topic comes up and you're off and running and people interrupt. And it's kind of like a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, when you're speaking, you're in control and you've got your story to get out. But on the other hand, you want to take a breath and you want it to be a dialogue, not a monologue. And I'm wondering how you handle that. Do you kind of break things up into snippets and take a break and see who wants to say something? Or do you just ram it through? I mean, I really struggle with this. Like, what's the right way to handle that?
So this is something that, and I'm just going to be very transparent and maybe a little vulnerable here. It's something my wife and I work on all the time, because we've been literally together every day now, all day long, for more than a year. And we have very different personalities, which is why we have a successful relationship. And so one coping mechanism for both sides is just patience and grace. Is that interrupting is just, it's going to happen. So is it realistic to establish ground rules at the beginning of a conversation? Maybe, maybe not. Being transparent with your conversational partner about how an interruption makes them feel. So they understand there's going to be consequences if you're interrupted. Particularly, I'm getting to an age where I start to forget things and names and things like that. And if I'm interrupted while trying to explain something, and while I'm thinking about, okay, what was that person's name? What was that breed of cat? Where was that race that we were at? Just explaining that an interruption isn't just necessarily a rude thing, but it can take someone's train of thought off. If on the other side, if you think someone is just blah, 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 maybe turning off their soliloquy, that's also is going to require a lot of diplomacy and patience as well. And maybe part of that is if you think they're rambling on, maybe it isn't them, maybe it's you. Maybe they're thinking things out while they're talking. And just as you've got to be patient when someone interrupts you, you got to be patient when you feel like, oh, I gotta cut this person off. They're just blah, blah, blah. Maybe they're working things out. And that's part of what they need to do is, we spend so much time in isolation. So many things are happening here.
Right.
Once they're audible and out there in the world, those ideas are going to evolve as well. So patience on both hands, patience to when someone interrupts you, and then patience when you feel like I just got to get in and make a point. Let them do their thing. Let them work things out. The space will come where when it's appropriate, you can get your 2 cents in, but maybe you got to, kind of figure out what they're doing before you realize what your 2 cents needs to be. And the other thing,
Right.
and this is something that and I love me an introvert. It's documented how much I love introverts, and the document is my wedding certificate. I married an introvert. Is that introverts take time to process stuff. So it's okay when someone stops speaking to have some silence while you're composing your thoughts. It's okay. You don't have to fill every single void with silence. I mean, Miles Davis, when he was not a genius trumpet player technically, but he was a genius musician because he understood space. And you can apply that same principle to a conversation. And maybe when you're starting a conversation, if we're speaking about ground rules, you just let the other person know, hey, heads up, it may take me a minute. If you ask me a question, it may take me a minute to compose my answer. If just give me a second to get my act together. Give me that. Don't feel like we've got to fill every space. And that's kind of an awkward thing to throw into a conversation. You're sitting down with someone you haven't seen in a year, you've got a delicious cup of coffee, and now you're going to say, oh, by the way, we're going to have to be quiet during this conversation. Try it. This is, the book that you just referenced, in the title is the word hard. The stuff that we're talking about is hard to do.
Yeah.
Going back to the yoga analogy, some of that yoga stuff is hard to do. You go to the gym, some of the exercises, they're hard. They hurt. Guess what? Results, you're more flexible, you're stronger. Is it fun? Is it comfortable? Hell no. Sorry about the language. Let me rephrase that. Hell no. But the end product is better because you did those hard things.
Along these lines, one of the questions that one of our friends asked this weekend was, well, when I'm listening to you, I'm thinking of all these things I want to say. And if I don't interrupt you, I'm going to forget them. And I said, if you stop doing that and just listen, you'll probably have several of those moments during my speaking. And when I'm done, take a little time to see what rises to the top, right? It doesn't have to be your first reaction. And that's when I said, the key to doing this really is very simple. Care about the other person and their story, hear them, right? And I'll segue into another article that really touched me last month with David Brooks in the New York Times, and the title was "Wisdom Isn't What You Think It Is." And he started talking about a book that some of you may be familiar with from the 90s called Tuesdays with Morrie. And Mitch Albom visited his college professor, who was unfortunately dying, and just wanted to gather all of the wisdom from Morrie Schwartz, who's just this incredible sociology professor at Brandeis. And one of the observations that David Brooks makes is, the takeaways weren't really that earth-shattering from Morrie. You know what I mean? It was like, focus on what you're good in, be present, blah, blah, blah. And he makes a point that wisdom and knowledge aren't the same thing, right? And wisdom really starts with being present and hearing, right? And listening to the other person and kind of creating what this environment. What he says is, when I think of the wise people in my own life, they are like that. It's not the life-altering words of wisdom that drop from their lips. It's the way they receive others. Wise people don't tell us what to do. They start by witnessing our story. They see us in a noble struggle. And there were so many things in this piece that just gave me goosebumps, and just thinking, like, there really isn't anything new under the sun, that there's so many simple truths out there, but how do you connect with someone's heart and really effectuate that change word? And it's being seen, being heard, right?
Well, and you said it again, it's the change word and motivation. And so two conflicting thoughts here. First, there's nothing new under the sun. These fundamental truths are the truth. At the same time, the things that have happened in the last couple of years have shown us that there are some things that need to be new under the sun. How we
Right.
relate to each other, how we see each other, and so the things that haven't changed are the value of symbiotic relationships, the value of experiences, and the fact that we, no matter how confident we are, particularly in this profession where there are so many really confident people, independent thinkers, self-starters, they're out, it's them against the world and they're succeeding. The challenge there is understanding that, hey, to move forward and to move us as humanity forward, we do need to change. And that's where this all ties back to,
Right.
not only when you're in a situation being an active listener, but actively seeking out those situations to share those experiences. And again, not in a virtue signaling kind of way, not doing it because, I need to go out and meet with people that are different than me to check a box. This is basic survival stuff at this point.
Right.
And to tie things to the profession, it's also a huge professional opportunity as well. As we're learning, as more people may be coming into this profession and clients may be different as well, the ability to empathize, the ability, and one of the epiphanies I had, this is a few years ago, there's a difference between figuring someone out and understanding them. Because
Right.
listening to someone and being involved so you can figure them out, that's like a manipulative thing. Understand, listening to someone and really paying attention to their experiences so that you understand them, that's a totally different thing that goes back to motivation. So, are you actively listening so you can find out how you can manipulate this person, or are your intentions pure because you want to understand, because what you may be hearing is going to change you? And so music analogy. Your friend that said, I've got so many things I want to say. I play in a band. I play bass in a band. I'm not the lead singer in the band. I'm not the lead guitarist. I'm part of the rhythm section, the foundation of the band. I also write songs. Time and again, 30 years of doing this stuff has proven that no matter how good I think an idea is that I bring to a band for a new song, the more open I am as a musician to the input from the other people in the band, the better that song is going to be. It happens every single time.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying there aren't
It's
songwriters out
beautiful.
there that there's a songwriter that brings a fully formed piece and it's fantastic. Sure, that can happen. But it's the same kind of thing in a conversation, is that, okay, yeah, I want to sit down with this person because I got this great thing I want to share with them. Or while I'm listening to them, this idea popped in my head. Okay, yeah, that's great. But, good friend of mine, Chris, who I played in bands with for years, he said the mark of a good musician or a good writer is how full their trash can is. How many ideas they come up with.
I love that.
This is a great song. I'm going to write it all down. You play, it's like, oh, this is crap. Sorry, bad word. This is crap. They throw it away. Same thing with a conversation. Is the first idea that pops in your head where you feel motivated, like, I got to interrupt this person because I got this great idea. Guess what? That idea probably is crap. So, and if you may need to edit all these bad words out of the conversation. Seriously,
It's
though,
too late.
Sorry, is that maybe that first idea isn't so good. Maybe the third or fourth, or maybe keep listening, because there could be even more songs, more creativity that comes out, the more input you're getting from the other person. But you got to be willing to say, okay, my concept for the song, or my perception of this person, or my perception of this issue or this idea, I got to be willing. I got to lose the ego enough to say, yeah, maybe that isn't the best idea.
Right. And maybe someone, maybe by opening your worldview up to include other perspectives, it's going to be better, right? And I think that's the whole thing about successful teams and successful lives, right? Is that every voice should not be a mimic of your own. Right. So I want to read a really beautiful quote from a psychiatrist, Scott Peck. He said, "Since true listening involves a setting aside of the self, it also temporarily involves a total acceptance of the others. Sensing this acceptance, the speaker will feel less and less vulnerable and more inclined to open up the inner recesses of his or her mind to the listener. As this happens, speaker and listener begin to appreciate each other more, and the dance of love is begun again. True listening requires a setting aside of oneself." And in the context of, Me Too and social unrest and all of the acrimony that we've all been experiencing during the pandemic, how can we heal from this? And I can't think of a better way than a refocusing on, what unites us. And in order to figure that out, you've got, you can't have, no one is the other. We're all in this together. So how do I break down those invisible barriers? And you do it by listening to them.
We did a podcast. We did a podcast. And we had Farrah Wilder come on to talk about social equity and fair housing issues, and that was one of the hardest things that I've done in my career. 30 years of housing policy almost, and I think what was hard is that I went into that podcast recording session hoping to have solutions, to have answers, to have a list of things to do, to share with the audience. Here's how you solve the fair housing crisis. And that wasn't, that motivation was wrong. Is that when you're dealing with big issues, and a big issue could be a big social issue, or it could be, the death of someone in your family, or it could be an intensely personal thing, is that, maybe a motivation isn't you're going to come out of this with all the answers. I think maybe the motivation is you're going to come out of this different.
Right.
You're going to come out of it different. You may not have. I was sitting with Tricia for lunch. Tricia Thomas, my boss, and your good friend and
dear friend. Yes.
Yeah, we were having lunch for the first time in a year outside downtown Pleasanton last week, and there's a tree across the street, and we were talking about organizational change, things like that. And I looked at that tree and I said, okay, look at that tree. You see that as you got this trunk, and then you got these branches that go off in different directions, and the branches don't, some make subtle turns, some make very sharp turns. And the bottom line is that you can't predict when a branch is going to make a turn. And sometimes it's a very sudden thing. So the bottom line is you still have a tree, and the tree didn't grow straight up. It took these unexpected turns. So in approaching a conversation, maybe that's one way to deal with, navigating it. If you're kind of a control freak and you want the conversation to go a certain way, think of it as a tree. You're going to end up with a tree that's based on branches that took surprising turns, and some were sudden, some weren't. But at the end of the day, you get a tree, and it grew up, and it's beautiful, and it's providing shade. So don't worry about navigating it. Just let it do its own thing, and be okay with that. If there's a particular point you want to make, it'll probably come out at some point organically. But to kind of direct that tree, you're going to end up with something artificial, and probably something not as strong as a naturally occurring tree that made the turns and twists as needed.
Right, exactly. It's the unexpected twists and turns and bumps and along the road that really create strength and perspective and context. I just think kind of related to this topic and in terms of hearing people is just kind of getting rid of your preconceived ideas and being open to different life experiences that weren't yours. The fact that you are not a prejudiced person does not mean that some people have not a lot, grown up in that kind of world. So just being open to it. And I have a real quick story. John is very deep into college basketball, and there's a show on Netflix called Last Chance University Basketball Edition, and it follows these kids at East LA City College. And I'm not a sports person, and I'm just like, it's a ball, like it's a game, like, whatever. And being open to listening to this 8-episode program and seeing these young men that have had a tough life, and not a life of privilege, and how this activity is their ticket out, right? They need a scholarship. They want to improve themselves. And just the week or so where we were watching this, it was a real eye-opener to me. And again, a reminder that people have different life experiences, and you only understand that by listening and kind of immersing yourself and getting a different perspective, right? And, it wasn't like I was in a conversation with this program, but I was open to, getting rid of all my sports prejudices and seeing how important this was in their lives. I mean, I'm just one dot on the planet.
There back when we could travel, I don't know if you remember traveling and going on vacations.
What was that?
Yeah,
Right.
we were on the plane going to Italy. I think it was our first trip to Italy, and I was reading the Rick Steves Guide to Italy.
Yeah.
And there was one line in that book that just blew my mind, and I think it was talking about food, or just maybe travel philosophy in general. And he said, if you're someplace and something doesn't suit your taste, change your taste. I mean, talk
Right.
about removing your head from your body and putting it back on in a completely different direction. And just, that's something you can absolutely extrapolate to everything else, is that just because your life experiences have set you up for certain expectations or a certain worldview, it's okay to change your taste. It's okay to understand that, some people don't like gelato, or only like pistachio gelato. It's okay. And, I don't mean to be glib or to downplay the negative experiences that folks have had, particularly that have come to light, obviously in the last few months. But just understanding that, their taste and what they have had to experience is completely valid,
Right.
because it is their experience. And not, I think the word is manage. We don't have to manage other people. We don't have to, put them into a box or say, this is the life decisions they made and this is the life that has resulted. Just understand, that they have their path, they have their circumstances, and it's just as valid as anybody else.
Right. And it's fun to be interested in people that aren't like you, right? It's enriching to your life to see how different things are done, and I had this experience last week of being at a luncheon. Who goes out to lunch? Well, you get to kind of do that again. So I was at lunch here in Sarasota with Pam O'Connor and Michael Saunders, who are just idol, wonderful, wonderful people. And I didn't say anything during the lunch, but one of the feelings I had was, this is just such an elegant, lovely conversation, where it was just like the ball was lobbed and then it was lobbed and it went, it was effortless, and everyone was being heard. And I contrasted this with some of the other conversations I'd had recently, where you're fighting for airtime and that the other person really doesn't even need you to comment, because there's going to be no room to comment. And if you do, it's a one-way street, So I think this whole idea of the art of a conversation and how beautiful it is, and enriching it is when everybody engaged feels heard and part of. And, you know, when people say like, I hate networking, you know, and I hate going and having to talk to people I don't know. And, you know, years ago, I figured it out. You know, ask people about themselves. You know, what are you doing here? How'd you get here? How'd you meet your spouse? Do you have an animal? You know, just the small talk that, you know, as Anna Sale talks about, make the small talk big, right? In any conversation, it's the small talk that evolves into talking about the real stuff, right, of life.
Small talk, big listen. And this is where, you know, as part of my job, I've gone to, you know, how many mixers, and it's like, no, not another mixer. And did I share my mixer strategy survival technique? Okay.
No,
I don't know
please
if we have time.
do.
Can I share my mixer?
We have time.
All right. So here it is. I'll throw an analogy on you. You know what a sea anemone is? It's a little animal that sits on the bottom of the ocean. Okay. Right. And what it does is its gig is it sits on the bottom of the ocean, things drift by and it grabs them, and that's how it does its thing. So you go to Mixer, and instead of working the room, I find a strategic location, just one spot, and I park myself there.
Hello, good morning.
And as people drift by, you know, have a conversation with them. I don't try to work the room anymore. And I've found that in terms of leaving that mixer not exhausted and just done. Sure, did I meet everybody at the mixer? Probably not. But maybe I have 2 or 3 really, really good conversations and I'm energized because I'm an extrovert. I get my energy from interacting with other people. And I leave the mixer energized instead of exhausted because I felt like, oh, I got to connect with X, Y, Z. No, just park yourself, wait for people to come there, and you start that small talk, but be ready to listen. You know, I can't think of any way that you dishonor people more than you ask that question, how are you? And then you're just waiting to share how you are, really. If you're going to ask someone how they're doing, y'all better be ready to hear what their answer is. Otherwise, you know, don't even go there. Small talk, big listen, because that totally changes the dynamic of conversation.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, Dave. I want to just add one more beautiful quote from David Augsburger, which is, being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are almost indistinguishable. You know, I mean, that's how powerful that connection is. So we actually are almost at the end of our hour here. It has been absolutely delightful, and I'd love for you to add anything that we didn't get to cover that you want to say.
Thank you. As mentioned earlier, the irony of asking a listener to do a lot of talking is not lost on me.
No.
Just, this is hard. The stuff that we're talking about, Leslie, is hard to do. It takes effort. And to just, you know, roll out the cliche, you know, if you get out of it what you put into it. And the more effort you put into, and you may have a whole bunch of crap going on in your life, and it's like, oh my God, I got to listen to this person. Work through that, you know, play through that, all that noise that's going on, engage, and you're gonna come out of it better. You're gonna come out of it different, that conversation. So yeah, the only thing I would add was, you know, this is hard, work on it, and be comfortable with the silence. It's right. Particularly the extroverts out there. It's okay just to have that pause, to take a breath and let folks know that, hey, in this conversation, it's all right if we take a breath and think a little bit, especially when we're able to get together again in real life. There's going to be so much blah, blah, blah. Oh, it's so nice to see you. It's okay just to, and that's part of the work too, is the, you know, holding back and listening.
Right. I mean, there's a time will come, you know, and I will just say that this is truly a gift that you give yourself, because when you give yourself the gift of being an active listener, all the pressure to come up with a quippy retort or can you top this travel story, or my relative this, all those. I was reading something over the weekend that said one of the gifts of getting older is you don't have to compete with anybody anymore. And I love that, but just the thought that you can give yourself the gift of letting go of all that pressure, and just listening and taking time to respond and see what pops up, and I loved your comment about the most successful songwriters have a really full wastebasket, that's part of the process, and if you really listen before you formulate your contribution, it's going to be so much better, so. All right, Dave, I love you. Thank you so much. You were just the best, just the best. And I'd like to thank everybody that was here this morning. I really appreciate the support and your enthusiasm for this really important topic. So have a fantastic May, and I'll see you again in June. Take care, everyone.